Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we're going to try something a little bit different from what I've normally done when it comes to the fictional universe type streams. After doing the initial introductions, I am going to be going into kind of a storyteller mode. And while I'm telling you guys this story, and those of you in the chat, if you've seen the movie 300, I want you to be thinking of that old Spartan who lost an eye and was sent by King Leonidas back to Sparta to warn his people. I want you to have that kind of mental image in your head of somebody like that telling a group of new recruits what's going on. Oh, hey, Outlaw, sorry, I didn't notice you there initially.
Oh, yeah, you're good, brother. What's going on, guys?
Nope. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the introductions. We've got Sean St. George.
Hello.
Megtow Outlaw just joined in the party.
Yo, yo, yo.
And we got Cliff from Out of Service. Is Brian going to be joining us as well? Do you know?
Yes, he will be joining us. He's out to dinner with his family right now.
Okay.
So he'll be joining us shortly.
Cool. Okay. Now I'm going to start the little ticker going. Those of you who are in the chat and are familiar with Warhammer 40K lore and history, go ahead and put down, are you a loyalist or are you a traitor? E.g., do you follow the Emperor or do you follow Horus? Because I'm just curious. But tonight we are going to be discussing the opening stages of the biggest event for the modern Imperium of Man in the Warhammer 40,000 setting. In fact, this is the event that put the Imperium on the road to be the society that everyone is familiar with from the actual tabletop game, Warhammer 40,000. We are discussing the fall of Horus to chaos, the fall of his brother Fulgrim, because that is actually a story that we do have a lot of information on. Unfortunately, I don't have a map for where that happened. The Istvaan III atrocity, and the Istvaan V drop site massacre. Like I said, when I go into narration mode, I would like everyone to basically picture a grizzled old veteran telling a bunch of new recruits about a horrific event that he was involved in that he barely survived. So, all that being said, we are moving on to, if there's no questions, we are moving on to the actual narration of this evening. Guys, feel free to jump in. If at any time, if you've got a question, feel free to jump in. And feel free to try to put yourself mentally in character for one of these individuals. Actually, okay. I do need to do one more thing, and that's an IRL. St. Louis Arch. Yes, I have been tracking that information since another member of our Gilded put a message about that out. I'm not going to touch that situation that's currently going on. It is too hot. It is too fresh. And it will more than likely get this channel evaporated off of the platform. At a later date, we might come back and discuss it, but for tonight, we're steering clear. And that is not meant as a negative on anyone who is worried about it or who wants to discuss it. It is just, I don't feel it's appropriate to discuss in the current situation. All right. That being said, narration mode. At some point after the great triumph over the planet Ulanor and the crushing of the largest orc infestation in the known galaxy at that point, the Emperor gathered together his sons in a small, modest gathering of some 250,000 soldiers, Astartes, and Titan legios on the planet of Ulanor and did a procession. At the end of the victory processional, he called an assembly and stated in no uncertain terms that he was quitting the crusade. But the galaxy had yet to be fully conquered, we all said. We wondered what was the Emperor planning, and not that we were going to question he that decided to stay upon Terra. The Emperor, apparently knowing the questions we were going to ask, stated without reservation that he was appointing his favored son, Horus Lupercal, as the War Master in his stead. The whole purpose was to complete the conquest of the galaxy and bring all of humanity into one dominion. Well, at the same time that the Emperor gave this declaration, he also proclaimed to all involved that Horus would be allowed to do something that none of the other legions had been. He could change his legion's name to carry his name. At this time, all other Space Marine legions were known by a number and a specific nomenclature. The 9th were the Blood Angels, the 1st were the Dark Angels, etc. Only one legion would be given the honor of carrying their Primarch's name into battle and having a color palette chosen based on the preferences of said Primarch, as opposed to the preferences of the Legion and their predilections towards combat and the cultures that they eventually would draw from. After the procession and the victory, the Imperial forces dispersed throughout the galaxy to continue their various attempts to crusade and bring the worlds of the galaxy into compliance. During this period of time, the Primarch Fulgrim, eventually known as one of the most vile of traitors, he was on a planetary mission to bring a Xenos world under compliance. And I'm bringing Fulgrim's image up as we speak. During the compliance of this world and the annihilation of the Xenos layer, Fulgrim entered a temple on the last archipelago city of the layer and found an ornate blade. The only flaw in this blade was a gem that was just slightly not matching the workmanship. Because his legion was the greatest, most perfect, and most fair of all the legions, he knew that either he himself or one of his artisans could fix the flaw in that blade. And he picked it up. Now, I am going to say, normally, an Astartes would not question a Primarch, whether it's his own or one of the brothers. In this situation, I must question. The layer we're engaging in what can only be described as vile self-desecrations in this temple, all in worship to an apparent entity that seemed to gain fuel from pleasure and debauchery. I hope that the Primarch at least wore a glove and disinfected that thing. I will leave the rest to your own imaginations. As the Primarch left the temple with his new sword, he started hearing whispers in the back of his mind. What could this be, he figured. There's no way that I am having any kind of influence besides my own. It must be nothing more than just fatigue. Well, it was more than fatigue. There was an entity living in that blade. And it possessed, given enough time, it possessed the Primarch Fulgrim. However, that part of the tale shall be revisited later. It was brought up here only for the context that it will give. We now turn our attention back over to the 16th Legion, the Sons of Horus. Over a period of time, this legion had brought more worlds into compliance than any of the others. Partially, this is the reason why the Emperor gave Horus the honor of being the War Master. Well, they received word of a bizarre human civilization that appeared to also not only be technologically advanced, but also working with non-human entities. A thing that could not be allowed to stand. But the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet was not powerful enough to eliminate them on their own. Horus, in his wisdom, felt it was best to try to negotiate with this civilization known as the Interrex and bring a diplomatic solution to bring them into the Imperial fold and not have to crush yet another human civilization. During their initial negotiations, however, an individual described as an Astartes that may or may not have been in the colors of the 16th Legion was reported to have broken into a museum hall and stole one of the more powerful and dangerous weapon relics that the Interrex had kept and had out so that way the Imperials could examine it and see where this culture stood in relation to the Imperium proper. This led to a minor conflict as the War Master and his forces left the system. Unknown to them, one of their more treacherous kin was also with them on that ship, or on one of the ships in their fleet, and had taken the blade. Sometime later, that blade got into the hands of a treacherous member of the Imperial Army, who was the custodian of a world that Horus had brought into compliance many years prior. As his legion went to this world to find out what was going on, he was given, in the most insulting way possible, word that his chosen commander is the one who had turned traitor. And, well, as anyone would be, he was livid. He directly led the assault onto the world of Davin IV, intending fully to bring this treachery to the end that it deserved. This particular individual was carrying the weapon from the Interrex Museum. By the way, here is the War Master up until his eventual fall to chaos. They arrived on the planet and found that rather than the lively and wholesome world that they had left behind, it was a fetid swamp, occupied by nothing more than the most disgusting and basal of creatures. As the Astartes began to move on the world, they were accosted by things that appeared to be zombies, grotesque creatures that took a lot of effort to permanently put down, even though in appearance their flesh was sloughing off of their bones as they moved. They were disgusting to look upon, and even more disgusting to try to fight. Weapon blows and bolter rails sank into their flesh, sometimes not having any more of an impact than a soft squelching sound. As the forces continued on, they found the remnants of a crashed starship on the surface of the planet. And once they arrived, the Imperial forces were told to establish a perimeter to make sure that no one could escape, while Horus took an entourage of some 100 Marines inside to try to hunt down the traitor. He eventually found him after the spaceship essentially collapsed on top of himself and many of his men. Wounded, Horus fought against the bloated and diseased form of his former friend and the commander he chose. After the commander had set the blade that he was using in such a way where when it hit the War Master, it caused him to receive a horrific injury and illness that no Space Marine had ever encountered before, and that appeared to be geared only to Horus himself. This anathema weapon caused the War Master, despite his victory over his treacherous fallen commander, to leave, or when he left the ship, to pass out immediately upon arrival before his soldiers. Horrified, his legion took him back up to his command ship, the Vengeful Spirit, and informed the Medicae that he needed to be seen immediately. The medics, they had no clue what they were looking at. This was no weapon, poison, or illness that they had ever seen before. Down below on Davin 3, there was a possibility that could save the War Master's life. Unfortunately, though, it involved them having to give up one of their most sacred rules within the governance of the Imperium. They had to risk a religious ritual which had been forbidden by the Emperor since the beginning of the Crusade. The War Master went in. Many of the legions expected him in 10 days to have the door open and their War Master to be dead. Instead, 7 days later, he comes out triumphant and apparently fully healthy. None questioned this. They were just happy that their War Master was back. Although he seemed different now. Where before he had a kind of bellicose humor that he could be approached and spoken to, not necessarily as an equal, but at least as a soldier. Now, unless you were summoned by him, you did not approach the War Master. And he began a campaign on worlds that eventually led to him reconnecting with several of his Primarch brothers and figuring out which ones could be convinced not to work with the Emperor anymore, and which ones had to be brought, and which ones would have to be annihilated. Fulgrim, Angron, these two very quickly turned to work with the War Master. His brother Magnus attempted to warn the Emperor about Horus's betrayal, and the War Master decided to change orders that were sent to his brother Layman Russ. Instead of bringing Magnus the Red, the Psyker Primarch, to Terra for trial, he was to be eliminated and his entire legion put to the torch. And the Space Wolves, under Layman Russ, were more than happy to oblige. That story we can discuss at a later date, though. Other Primarchs were encountered and evaluated, and the ones that Horus did not feel he could earn, he sent on campaigns all throughout the galaxy to try to get them out of the way enough so when he did begin his final assault, they could not intervene. He wanted to limit the number of individuals that could potentially stop him from getting to the Imperial Palace and ending this conflict quickly. But before he could do that, he had to purge his own legions. Those that were loyal to him, he sent orders to, and those that were close enough to joined with him in the assault on a planet on a system known as Istvaan, that had also amazingly gone traitor to the Imperium. It now must be asked if this was some kind of conspiracy, many, many decades in the making. But that idle speculation is not for tonight. As the forces were gathering, the first 3 additional legions that were loyal to Horus managed to arrive. They managed to arrive in the Istvaan system with Horus, the Death Guard under Mortarion, the World Eaters under Angron, and the Emperor's Children, initially under the command of one of their captains named Eidolon, but soon joined by Fulgrim himself. All were known to be loyal to the... Say again? Okay.
I don't think anybody said anything. All of us are still muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I heard someone ask a question. Which, if you guys have questions, jump in.
Yeah,
Oh,
heck
I'm
yeah,
sure
man.
we'll have tons.
Would
Just
the
trying to
weapon
listen to it right now.
would the weapon that struck Horus not be considered a weapon, but a seed of chaos?
Oh, very good. And yes, it was definitely a seed of chaos, specifically Nurgle. But continuing on, the 4 legions that were loyal to Horus and within his general neighborhood began their assault on the Istvaan system. During their assault, several members that were loyal to the Emperor were killed, but not all of them. There was still enough loyalist Marines within the legions that Horus commanded that he needed to purge them completely. His brother Angron, the most direct and bellicose of the traitor Primarchs, insisted upon, rather than using subterfuge and guile, just ordering them, all the loyalists, into one space and telling them to either choose or either decide to sign on with the War Master directly and forego their oaths to the Emperor or be terminated. Horus, however, had a different plan in mind. He decided not only was he going to purge his legions, but he was going to send a message to the Imperium at large. For you see, when certain atrocities occur on the physical plane, they resound throughout the warp, and they can spread fear and terror just as easily as a Vox transmission or a vid screen. So he dispatched several hundred loyalist members of his legions down to the planet of Istvaan III. Many of these warriors had no idea why they had been chosen. Some felt that this was their War Master's way of letting them restore some of their personal honor that they may have somehow lost through some unintentional slight. Others suspected that they were being sent down because they were the powers that be in their legions were trying to be rid of them. And others, mainly the World Eaters, didn't care. They just wanted to fight something. The Death Guard were sent to do what the Death Guard did best, engage in a grinding attritional conflict against the capital city's outermost defenses. The World Eaters, being about as subtle as a brick through the face, dropped their assault pods right into the central temple of this newly corrupted civilization. The Sons of Horus did their stereotypical spear point assault, targeting the weak area of the enemy lines and driving directly for it, intending to break through and then pour in. Think of the ancient myth of the Trojan horse, only times about 500. The battle was, by Astartes standards, glorious. The Istvanians had all but surrendered within 4 hours of the initial assaults. However, the fleet in orbit was moving out of deployment position and into orbital bombardment position. a small number of individuals that were still on the fleet knew that something was wrong and were making moves to try to go and warn the Imperium. At that point, though, Horus began his initial assault on the Imperium itself with the virus bombing of his own men down on the planet. A virus bomb is a horrible exterminatus grade weapon. It is a weapon that causes organic material to melt down at a rapid rate. It can eat through concrete, ceramite, the rubber seals of armor plating. If it's anything that's even slightly organic, this virus will find a way in. And once it's inside, there is no cure. One frigate from the trader fleet broke away, still commanded by one loyal to the Imperium, and they fled, leaving the system just after the virus bombing began. As the bombardment commenced, the treacherous warrior Abaddon, in future times to be known as the Despoiler, came forth, and when he was given the honor of initiating the lance strike that would cause the planet below to catch fire in a conflagration of apocalyptic proportions, he uttered this phrase, "Let the galaxy burn." As Istvaan caught fire down below, the civilian members of the expeditionary fleet were watching on the embarkation decks of their various ships. They did not survive any longer than the individuals down on the surface of the planet. However, thanks to warnings sent by Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children, which I'm about to put an image of up now. If I can find the right one. There we go. Saul Tarvitz managed to get into a dropship and get in close enough to the surface of the planet before the bombardment began, and he informed his brother Marines down below to seek cover. Of the roughly 15,000 Marines or so, possibly more, possibly less, that were present on the planet, roughly 2/3 that were there managed to make it to safety before dying horrible deaths at the hands of their treacherous brethren. After the firestorm and the virus burned themselves out, these warriors came out and essentially challenged the War Master and his treasonous brethren to come down and face them in honorable combat. Horus was preparing for another virus bombing. His brother Angron was not going to put up with that, and just launched an assault from the World Eaters directly onto the planet. They would deal with their treacherous kin the way that they always had themselves. After 4 months of brutal and vicious conflict, the final loyalists were determined to have either been wiped out on the surface of Istvaan or were so badly depleted that a final orbital bombardment would be all that was necessary in the eyes of the War Master to finish them off. Unfortunately for him, that 4 months was also enough time for 3 loyal Imperial legions to be dispatched to try and come to the assistance of the Istvanians and to bring Horus, Angron, Fulgrim, and Mortarion to justice, to be brought before the Emperor to stand to for their crimes against the human race and against the Imperium. The treacherous Horus had his had one of his brothers, the Primarch Fulgrim, establish a defensive perimeter on the planet known as Istvaan V. I am about to throw up a map of the battlefield there, and this will stay up from most of what remains because it is a fairly important part of what's to come. Horus and his surviving warriors from the legions that were loyal to him moved into what was known as the Urgal Depression on Istvaan V, having the the Imperial Fists build the most perfect defensive batteries that they could. We are talking what the ancient Europeans would refer to as the Maginot Line, or the Fortress of Europe, only writ much larger. Titan positions were built all along the depression. The legions themselves had pillboxes and bunkers situated at points all over. No one would be able to get in without knowing that they were in a fight, and those that got in may not be able to get out. Unfortunately for Horus, his brothers did arrive. Of the warriors, or of the legions that arrived, they were led by Horus Manus of the Iron Hands, a bellicose and blunt member of the Legiones Astartes, who is known as the Gorgon among many of his brother Primarchs, partially because of the fact that he had all the subtlety of a chainsaw, and partially because of the fact that he had a face that would turn Medusa to stone. As he was arriving, he was joined by Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard, the 19th Legion, and he was also joined by Vulcan of the Salamander's Legion. Vulcan and Corvus Corax both advised that Fulgrim, that Horus Manus wait until more or additional legions arrived, because they were expecting further reinforcements from an additional 4 legions, more than enough to take into custody and or annihilate 3 to 4 treacherous Space Marine legions, as well as pick up any survivors from Istvan that they could find. Well, unfortunately for them, they did not get that chance, because the Gorgon decided he wanted to go in specifically to address the insult by his brother Fulgrim, whom before the atrocity at Istvan had come to try to convince Manus to join the heresy. Horus Manus, blinded by rage and not being of the tactical soundness that he should have been, ordered an immediate assault. Drop pods were launched. Astartes from all 3 of the loyal legions went down and began their assaults in ways that were appropriate to their individual legions. The Raven Guard, going in to try to gather intelligence as to what the Imperial traders had. The Salamanders trying to establish defensive perimeters and beachheads before moving in to support the Raven Guard. And the Iron Fists just dropping in directly on top of the target, fully intending to smash them to pieces. They did have Titan support, but they only had 1 legion with them, and it may well have been a demi-legion. Hey, Broken Pine. We're doing kind of a different format tonight. Please bear with, and if you stick around, tell me if you like this, because honestly, I'm not sure how good it's actually going. But continuing on, the loyal legions hit dirt, and the true battle began. Entire volumes could be written on the various heroes and villains on both sides of the equation. No No quarter, no succor was asked or given by either side. Eventually, Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus met each other at some point in the Urgal Depression in single combat. And Ferrus Manus lost his head to Fulgrim. Literally. After this point, the other loyalist legions found out that their support was finally arriving. They pulled back, fully intending to resupply, refuel, and rearm with their alleged brother Astartes. They get close. As they get close enough to get visual communications and confirmations with their alleged loyalist brothers, banners unfurled. They had turned to chaos. 7 legions against 3, one already having lost its Primarch. 2 of them down to almost 40% casualties from the attack. The massacre began in earnest. The Legio Mortis strode out and began to decimate the loyalist Titan legions that were present with them. The Iron Hands, or the Iron Warriors, went into the defenses provided by the Emperor's children and made themselves at home, going into a mode of siege warfare that hadn't been seen in the Crusade. In fact, the nearest equivalent was from an ancient Terran conflict in the early part of the 20th century in the second millennium. All of this led to the all but total annihilation of 2 additional legions. The survivors managed to make it off Istvaan, and some of them managed to make it out of the system. Very few actually played an active role in the remainder of the heresy. The Raven Guard, they managed to get back to Terra, and Corvus Corax managed to learn what the Emperor had done to create the Astartes in the first place. Unfortunately, what happened with that is also a tale for another day. There is much that happened later on in the heresy. And now, as we stand on the gates of Terra, looking over the tides of traitors, getting ready to overrun our position, I ask you all, do you choose loyalty, or are you going to choose treachery? Thus endeth the narration of the Battle of Istvaan, of the Istvaan system, and the beginnings of the Horus Heresy. So, gentlemen, what did you think?
I only have 3 words. For the Emperor.
For the Emperor.
What
So-
I
I
missed.
missed a little bit of it.
What did you
Why
miss?
did Horus betray?
Oh,
Say that again, Sean.
Why did Horus betray the Emperor?
Okay, that
Like,
all right, from the point of view I was telling it from, none of us would have known. So I'm glad this didn't go as long as it did, because now we can do Q&A and go into what is actually known from the lore.
Okay, cool.
yeah.
During his time in the temple on Davin, Horus Lupercal had his soul essentially transmitted into the warp, where various entities in the warp essentially were trying to convince him to betray the Emperor. And
Okay.
what ended up happening, as bizarre as this is going to sound, his brother, Magnus the Red,
Okay.
was also basically punted his soul into the warp to try to stop all of this from happening. And, well, he made the mistake of telling Horus, remember who he was. Horus was an incredibly proud individual. You got to remember, he had been at war in one form or another for somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 years, if not longer. Games
Damn.
Workshop is very finicky about putting out an accurate or timetable for how certain things operated. And, well, during the time in the warp, War Master Horus managed to find out that he was he saw a version of the future that would occur if certain things did not happen.
What world was that?
Okay.
It was Dancing Pop.
Yeah, it was Dancing Pop. I'm just wondering how the heck that one jumped in here. I don't have that particular sound clip.
Whoa. Dude.
Not that I'm complaining, because honestly, we could use some comic relief given how dark the story is, but now Horus, he saw a vision of the future, and this is actually one of the very few times where storytelling in Warhammer is kind of subtle. But the Chaos Gods didn't lie to him. They showed him the 41st millennium that he would create. They just didn't give him the context of how he would end up creating that 41st millennium.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that happened from the period of time of Istvaan V all the way up to the current era of Warhammer, where Robert Gilliman is woken up and Cadia is blown into matchsticks, is all because of the fact that Horus believed the entities in the temple.
Okay. And so I guess you said he was prideful.
Say again?
I guess you said Horus was prideful.
Oh, yeah.
Or his brother told him, remember who you are, and he was probably very self-centered and was like, well, if I can create this, who needs a fucking emperor?
Well, here's the thing. What he saw in the future Imperium was what's known as a hive city on a cardinal world, where he finds a plaza with a preacher, and in that plaza there are 10 statues, 9 of them surrounding a large central figure. Now, Horus, he had no context for any of this. All he knew was the Imperium that he was working to build was a secular Imperium. There wasn't supposed to be religiosity anywhere in the Emperor's grand scheme. And what he saw left him absolutely horrified, because not only was this a religious procession that he saw, it was a religious procession that was worshiping the Emperor.
Okay.
And the War Master, he saw this and was like, wait a minute, this goes completely against what dear old dad told me he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So when Magnus told him to remember who he was, Horus remembered he didn't have a statue on that plinth. Neither did half of his brothers. He wanted that statue. And when he was told to remember who he was, in his mind, he was betrayed. And in his thought process, if the Emperor had betrayed him, that meant the Emperor did not deserve his fealty.
Okay.
Now, the overall brutality of the... Say again?
I could see how that would drive a prideful person to be, say, fuck this shit, I'm out.
Well, and here's where things get even nastier. Would you say that from the very truncated version of the story I told you of the drop site massacre and the Battle of Istvaan III, that was a brutal conflict?
It sounds like
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Horus was of the opinion that the only good war was a short war. And the only way you could guarantee that a war was going to be short is to make it brutal and violent to the point where no one would want to try to fight you again.
So doing the Genghis Khan thing.
Basically, yeah. And so what his thought process was when he decided he was going to go against the Imperium, he was going to take out all the stops, go complete whole ham. I'm going to annihilate all of you, and no one had better get in my way. And the thing is, though, he gave his brother Primarchs every opportunity he felt he could to join him. He tried to convince Sanguinius of the Blood Angels that the Emperor could not be trusted. He tried to do the same with Guilliman and all the others. Think essentially of a mix between a Sith Lord from Star Wars and a corrupt politician.
Well,
that's kind of redundant.
Only who also has,
because then again, the Sith was a corrupt politician.
Yeah.
only add to that also having the military prowess of most of history's greatest military leaders all in one mind.
Yeah, because aren't they designed humans?
Yeah, essentially. Each Primarch is thought to have been designed to fulfill a certain role in the future Imperium that the Emperor was trying to build. Magnus the Red, a super powerful psyker. And the way the Imperium communicates is through psychic emanations through what's known as the warp. It's thought that Magnus the Red was being groomed, so to speak, to be the person on the Golden Throne controlling the communications network after the Imperium was fully founded.
So another question I got is, and I see this very often in stories I hear about, where is the Emperor in all this?
All right, at this stage in the storyline, the Emperor himself is on Terra, engaging in various experiments and projects to try to solidify humanity's control over the galaxy.
Okay.
At the moment when Horus was in the temple on Davin, having his mind messed with by the warp entities, the Emperor was working on something called the Webway Project. He wanted to create a system similar to what an alien species called the Eldar uses to travel throughout the galaxy without having to use the warp at all. He wanted something that was essentially like the Stargate network from the Stargate TV show.
And that was because the warp carried the risk of succumbing to corruption, right?
Something to that effect,
chaos,
yeah.
So the Horus Heresy is kind of a bad or worst case scenario of that side effect.
Pretty much. Because the thing is, when Horus was in the temple on Davin, his soul was cast unprotected into the Immaterium or the warp. He did not know that
So his soul is inside that warp or that dimension.
The thing is, the Chaos Gods, for whatever reason, they chose not to directly corrupt him, but instead they basically gave him everything he needed so he would corrupt himself. Each one of them figured he was going to come and join with them directly.
Oh, so they took a gamble and they got it right.
Kind of. And Tommy, thank you for bringing that one up. Again, the narration part of this was being done from the knowledge base of a member of the Astartes who may have been either with one of the Shattered Legions or with one of the legions that heard about events later on. Believe me, we are not leaving out that piece of garbage. The individual that Tommy Clements is mentioning is a Space Marine chaplain by the name of Erebus. Erebus was part of the Word Bearers Legion. And for those of you who saw the stream talking about the Space Marine Legions, you might remember the Word Bearers were hyper-religious. they actually worshipped the emperor, even though the emperor told them many times, I'm not a god, don't worship me. That's bad. Don't make me spank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, an event that occurred well before the heresy, and it's questionable exactly when in the timeline it did occur, so hence why I left it out of the narration portion of this, was the humbling of the word bearers. The word bearers legion were called back to a world that they had basically turned into their ideal of the perfect imperial city. Well, the problem was it was a religious culture. The emperor, being a fedora-wearing atheist, didn't like this. Well, what he didn't tell the word bearers was that the Ultramarines were also being called to that planet to decimate it. Now, why he chose the Ultramarines rather than the Space Wolves to do this, I don't know. I think it was just kind of lazy writing on the part of the author who wrote this particular story. But the Ultramarines, they bombed that city. Yeah, Tommy Clements, you're completely correct. The first heretic. But the Emperor ordered the destruction of that city. I want to say the planet was called Malakia, but I am fully admitting it's been a while since I read it, so I couldn't tell you for certain that that is the name. But the Emperor sends the Ultramarines in, has them bomb the planet bomb the city to rubble, sends the word bearers down to observe the fruits of their labors. And that's literally what the Emperor tells them. And the thing is, the Emperor himself doesn't directly speak to Lorgar of the word bearers or Erebus for that matter. He has his major domo, a human by the name of Malkador, come up and explain to Erebus or Lorgar where he effed up and why he was why this was happening. Now, Malkador himself was a very powerful psyker as well. And when Lorgar was trying to say, F you, why are you doing this? His entire legion was given a psychic command to kneel, and every one of them were compelled to do so in front of the Ultramarines, who they really didn't like, even back at that point. So, yeah, that led to some angst among those siblings, which is probably the nicest way to put it. So, where else do you have questions from the actual story part of this?
Can't think of anything.
Because believe me, I glossed over a lot going with the whole concept of telling it from the point of view of somebody who may or may not have been there.
The thing is, my question was with the vision.
Mm-hmm.
Were the 10 statues that Horus saw, were they the victors or were they the martyrs?
Those were the Primarchs that remained loyal, and the Emperor himself.
Oh, okay. So it's okay.
See, here's the thing with Warhammer that I absolutely love. There is no true good guy in the Warhammer universe.
Oh, no.
And there is no true bad guy in the Warhammer universe. Even the most good factions are downright flippin' evil.
Yep.
A faction that just recently got a range refresh and brought back into the narrative is the Sisters of Battle.
Yep.
They're often described as nuns with guns.
Yep.
Now, Cliff, you're chuckling. You know where I'm about to go with this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The Sisters of Battle, they will very happily burn an entire city just because one person asked a question during a sermon. They also will use hopefully cloned infants as servitors, grafting wings onto them, lobotomizing them, and
The
using them to
cherubims,
carry
yeah.
incense, and using them to carry incense around the battlefield. Now, granted, Space Marines do similar, but at least when Space Marines do that, these lobotomized infants are generally vat-born, and thus were never intended to live. And they also are generally used to carry things of actual military use, like ammunition, scanner systems, lights. And again, with the Sisters of Battle, you don't want to piss off one of these ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you meet a Sister of Battle who just happens to be moderately cute
Oh God.
in your definition.
All right.
This sounds bad.
This is bad,
Well-
right? This is bad.
Oh, now the sisters, they are trained and indoctrinated in such a way that the Soviet Union would go, what?
Oh yeah.
These ladies are completely psychotic when it comes to their loyalty to the Imperium.
Mm.
So, hypothetically, actually, hang on. You know, I'm just gonna see if I can call up an image real quick and just show you what I'm getting at. And that's only because, like I said, this just shows you how insane the Warhammer universe is. Okay. All right, cool. We've got two really good options.
All right.
So I'm calling them up real quick. Just give me a moment to actually get
Okay.
this.
Mhm.
Because we've got one that is what looks like an official piece of art. And I'm going to go ahead and call up one of the fan art versions.
All right.
Now, I'm going to tell you all right now, I generally, when it comes to the Sisters of Battle, I generally prefer the official imagery. Only because I know the way the Warhammer 40k universe operates.
Hmm.
Okie dokie. So, you want the official one first, or the one that most people like to think of when it comes to the sisters?
Let's do the official one and then bring up the fan art one, and you can point out all the flaws.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the simple thing is just look at the face. You notice she's missing an eye.
Mm-hmm.
She's scarred all the heck on one side.
Okay.
And does that look like a lady you would want to go anywhere near if you had any option not to go anywhere near her?
No.
Oh yeah.
And I'm guessing she's probably been operating as a Sister of Battle for. What are the insignias they have for service for the Sisters of Battle? Because I remember for the Space Marines, it's like the
They don't have
embedded-
service studs for the Sisters of Battle. I don't
Okay.
think they actually track that, at least according to the lore.
Okay. That would be kind of cool though. But the service studs, I mean, she'd probably be a couple hundred years old. That would literally be the epitome of the term old battle axe right there.
Now, here is the fan art version. That's a pinup model.
I've seen that one before.
The other one was hotter.
Yeah, But that's a pinup model right there.
Yeah.
That's not even
Whereas-
a pinup model.
But what I'm mainly talking about in the facial features.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're looking at official artwork for the Sisters of Battle, most of them look like they have been through a meat grinder.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that, gentlemen. Had to cough.
That's
Oh, you're
okay.
good.
Kind of like Hammerhand. I don't want to do that in you guys' ears.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the quote unquote good guy factions in 40K are pretty flippin' evil. And I just picked on the Sisters because they are the most egregious and open about it. It's just different shades of how effed up they are. That being said, it could be argued that the quote unquote bad guy factions actually do have some redeeming qualities to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and let's pick on not the Ultramarines, but the Alpha Marines for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
In official lore, they're traitors. In 40K, they are run as Chaos Space Marines, the bad guys. If you look at the lore with them, they are either the most bipolar group of bad guys in the multiverse, or they're not really bad guys. It's hard to say. Because a lot of what they do does hurt the Imperium overall. And they were directly involved in a major war called the Siege of Vrax, which that would deserve a streaming series on its own. Quite honestly, I mean, Henry Cavill, if he wanted to do a war in the 40K or 40K universe, Vrax would be the one to use.
Huh.
And that's also where most people are familiar with a faction called the Death Korps Krieg from.
That's right.
But the thing is, the Alpha Legion arrived on Vrax. They were there right as the Imperium was on the cusp of victory. And they had a commander that convinced the traitor Cardinal on Vrax to do a few minor warpy rituals. And instead of the war ending, Chaos Marines came to assist, and the war went for another 10 years or so, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
But at the thing is, as soon as those additional Chaos Warriors arrived, the Alpha Legion kind of melted into the background. And Tommy Clements, you're not wrong. And neither one of us are answering that question, or neither one of them are answering that particular question now, are they? So, but
Planet Man showed up.
Say again?
Planet Man showed up.
Planet Man.
I assume that's one of your buddies.
Yep.
So, guys, from the tale I just told you, and then the context that I gave afterwards, which side would you probably be on at this point in the timeline of the heresy?
I'd still rather go with the Emperor's side.
Hey,
I mean, it's damned
good
if
old
you do,
loyalist.
damned if
I'm
you
a part-
don't. But at least if I wind up getting on the if I stay on the Emperor's good side, I probably
You
won't
might
suffer
live.
a torturous death. Yeah.
Well, considering the fact
Where
that
I can take a Viking's death.
You know where I'm going to be.
Anywhere I can take a Viking's death.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would probably be with the Space Wolves,
Yeah, because that's what I've been with, haven't I?
pretty much.
Yeah, you were with that last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably the Emperor. Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to outlaw because you weren't here for the Space Marines stream. I'm not going to ask you which of the legions you would probably go with because we'd have to go and explain all 18 of them again.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us wants to sit through that all over.
Well, not on a live stream, but backstage probably.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But believe me when I say that the stories from the Horus Heresy are far from over with what little bit I told you. The events of the Fall of Horus, the Urgal Depression, and the massacre itself were probably about a 2-year period.
Okay.
Damn.
The overall Horus Heresy from the battle on Istvaan to the final siege of Terra was roughly 7 years. And we have not touched upon what Titans are. We haven't talked about who is potentially the first of the Imperial Saints, who played a relatively significant role in the narrative for the 3 books that make up the first part of the Horus Heresy series.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't even gone into some of the really wacky stuff. And we haven't touched on why Magnus was not actively involved in the Great Crusade at the point in time where the heresy occurred. There is a very legitimate reason why his legion was sequestered on their home world during the heresy.
Hmm.
And actually, we can go ahead and touch on that since we've got plenty of time. We haven't even gone close to the 2-hour mark. Before we do that, do we want to go ahead and take a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad.
Okay, let me go ahead and mute everybody. And I will kick things on again here in about 5 minutes. Okay, we're not kicking on just yet. I'm gonna give the guys another couple minutes to go ahead and refill their drinks, use the restroom, and whatever. Um, I do want to ask the chat, for those that have watched all the way through to this point, did you guys like the in-universe narration, or was that more of a detriment to the way that the stream format is? If you liked it, next time I do a war stream like this, I will try to actually write up a semi-script and try to actually stick to it, as well as find some better imagery for you guys. But I kind of need to know so I know whether or not this is good, bad, or just horrible. Okay, I'm going to address a couple things in the comments real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody because I think we're getting close to the 5-minute mark. Tommy Clements, I actually do listen to Voldemort quite frequently. I love the way he starts out with an in-universe narration followed by an out-of-universe explanation. And that's kind of what I was aiming to go for on this, but I don't know if I necessarily hit just the sweet spot with that. I mean, you all have to bear in mind, I initially started doing this channel as kind of a pressure relief valve for the guys that have more established channels when they took time off, and unfortunately became kind of a quasi long-term thing. So, but that also leads to an announcement that I'm going to make. Normally I planned on doing these shows bi-weekly. That would give me enough time to actually dig up topics that I figured people would be interested in. Sometimes relationship dating stuff, sometimes stuff like what we're doing tonight, talking about a fictional universe, sometimes conspiracy theory and other oddball stuff. The community has gotten to be big enough with enough voices that I'm not entirely sure if I'm really adding a huge amount to what's out there. So the channel's still gonna be around. I'm just not gonna guarantee at this point a bi-weekly stream. It might turn into one of these things where I do once a month or twice a month and have shows where I'm just talking about random stuff. And I am going to do pre-records from time to time with just my own random thoughts on various topics. But just because the show might not be on as frequently as possible does not mean I'm killing the channel. And it does not mean I'm giving up on this. It just means that I think the purpose that I made it for is complete. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody and let them jump in with any 2 cents they have it. So, Sean, you're back. Cliff, Outlaw, and Brian.
Heck yeah.
So, do we want to go ahead and just go with just kind of a lore breakdown of some of the key events outside from an out-of-universe perspective of what I discussed
Sure.
this evening?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and break it down like that.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we will go ahead and start with the chronological. The battle of Ulanor. The Imperium had been involved in what was known as the Great Crusade for somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 600 years at that point, if I remember correctly. And basically, they had found what was thought to be the home world of the greenskin menace known as the Orcs. And the Emperor, knowing how much of a pain in the ass the Orcs had been throughout history, he wanted them crushed. So he brought somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 legions to Ulanor, plus several Titan formations, plus his Adeptus Custodes. And they basically smashed the largest Orc empire that the galaxy had seen to that point in Imperial history.
Nice.
Afterwards, the Emperor felt that he could go ahead and hand his military operations over to his chosen son. The Emperor allegedly did not see his Primarchs as sons, the way his Primarchs saw themselves as his sons. The Emperor saw the Primarchs as tools, intended to be used and discarded when they no longer had a function. And this can actually be seen quite clearly when it comes to his thoughts about Angron, when it was revealed that the butcher's nails that he had implanted in his skull were killing him. And the Emperor's reaction was just like, okay, let me know when he's dead so we can work on training a replacement.
Now it's pretty fucking was it
Callous?
Yeah.
Well, you also got to remember the Emperor is of indeterminate age. He could be legitimately immortal, or at the time of the Great Crusade kicking off, he could have been about 10,000 years in age. No one really knows.
Oh, lovely.
And that's one of the things about this character from Games Workshop that I love. Games Workshop, I give them a lot of flack for not really being good when it comes to certain elements of storytelling. But when it comes to ambiguity about some of their characters, I love the fact that they keep certain things where you're guessing as to just what the motivation and history of this guy is. No one really knows for sure if the Emperor of Man is truly immortal, nor do they know how he was born. There are multiple fan theories, conspiracy theories, and in-universe theories for what the origin of the Emperor is. And There's some who think that he is the amalgamation of several ancient shamans who committed a ritual suicide and recongealed in the warp to be reborn as the Emperor. There's some who think that he might have been an entity known as an Old One. Which was a highly psychic, highly powerful life form that may or may not have been directly involved in the creation of several life forms in the Warhammer universe. No one knows. And I love that ambiguity. Okay, don't get me wrong. I like it in Star Wars where they've given you all the history of Palpatine. You know what Palpatine is. You know what he stands for. You know what he's going to do when he's on screen. However, when you look back at the original Star Wars trilogy, do you like the Emperor from what you saw in those three movies more, or what you saw from those three movies plus the plus the prequel movies?
I prefer the original trilogy because it gave him an air of mystery.
There was mystery and ambiguity to him.
Yeah.
You knew he was evil, but you didn't know just how evil he was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like the personification of it. Like, I don't know if George Lucas had an idea of how he got deformed the way he was, or if the deformity was just a way for him to show visually exactly how evil this guy is.
And the other part too is, you know, it's kind of ambiguous with the way how his deformity came to be as to whether it was truly a deformity or it was him him actually revealing his true form.
Yeah, because what is it? Many storytellers will use a device like that to because they can't always in text or even in film. You can only convey so much, but if you add additional factors, such as like he's so evil and corrupted that it's taking a toll on his body.
Exactly.
Now, going back to the Emperor, I love the fact that there's ambiguity about his origin. I love the fact that you don't know what his full motivation is for the Great Crusade. All anyone in the universe knows is he started the Great Crusade intending to reunify all of the ancient human polities that had been created before something known as the Dark Age of technology. However, what we do know is that the Emperor is an incredibly xenophobic individual. He hates anything that's non-human with an ever-loving passion. If you are a non-human and you enter Imperial space, you had better have some very useful skill or tool to trade, because you probably aren't getting back out in one piece.
Oh, probably be executed on the spot.
If you're lucky.
Oh, God.
Several of the Horus Heresy novels, in fact, start out with whatever legion is the focus of that novel, working on engaging in a genocide against random alien race that hadn't been heard of previously. But when the Emperor decided he was done with the Crusade, it wasn't because he was done with the Crusade, it's because he felt his role in it was over. He had enough skilled commanders that he could go ahead and give one of them the full keys to the galaxy and be like, just don't break it.
Yeah.
While he goes off and runs his experiments.
Exactly.
Well, it makes a question too as to whether it was just he had thought he had accomplished his first experiment, which were the Primarchs. Because like you said before, they were each created and bred for a specific role. Now, it's not specified what they are, But maybe he thought they had fulfilled it, at least until the Horus Heresy kicked off.
Yeah, and the thing is, you can kind of guess what the different Primarchs were supposed to be for by their predilections and skill sets.
Yeah.
But it's never straight up spelled out 100%. And again, I love that. I love ambiguity in stories like this. Who is more interesting to you guys? Someone like Horus Lupercal, who could be a hero, could be a villain, depending on where you're looking at him in the story, or Captain America.
Well, obviously Horus.
I think Horus has a lot more to it than, because as much as there is about Captain America, he's a pretty black and white character.
Well, there's also a lot of stuff about Cap out there that has killed the mystery behind the character.
Yeah. Or it gets retconned every 10 years.
Now, 40K has been retconned quite a few times as well, even in the time I've been into the hobby. And relatively speaking, I've been in it a short period of time compared to some folks. But something else that you guys might find to be an interesting talking point is that the Primarch Horus, he may or may not have actually been the one that the Chaos Gods wanted in the first place. He may have just been the one they settled for because he was in the position of being the War Master.
Yeah,
Because there were several attempts in the novels.
Good.
Well, there were several attempts in the novels to basically turn Sanguinius of the Blood Angels to the dark side.
Wasn't that because they were trying to exploit the genetic flaw?
That's just it. Again, the ambiguity of the storytelling. It could have been they were trying to exploit the flaw. It could also have been the fact that Sanguinius, due to a mutation, was an angel.
Yep.
He also had the gift of foresight and premonitions. And he had the tendency of looking for the positive end results of his premonitions. So if you're a power-hungry entity that lives in the nether realms that could be considered hell, do you want the guy who everyone in the Imperium is going to look at and go, yeah, I want to be like you? Or are you going to go with the guy who is essentially the favored son and may or may not be a spoiled rich kid? Because there are many times in the early Horus Heresy novels where Horus essentially throws a little rich kid temper tantrum. Well, Cliff, have you read the Horus Heresy novels?
No, I have not.
Okay. How about you, Brian? Because I heard one of you guys responding as though you had heard them or had read them.
I have not yet.
Okay. My apologies. I thought one of you two was responding in a way that implied that you'd seen the same thing I had seen. There is a scene in the second book in the Horus Heresy series. The Emperor had sent an individual known as a Remembrancer out to Horus's fleet, and her whole job was to catalog everything about Horus. She was going to be Horus's personal biographer, essentially.
Okay.
All right.
And well, Horus, yeah, he spoke to her. He treated her with all the dignity and respect you would expect somebody in the kind of position he was in to do for a high-ranking delegate. But he did basically tell her straight up that he really didn't want the Remembrancer Order out there. he thought that they were a waste of space, waste of time, and kind of an insult. Well, a few of the individuals who escaped to warn the Imperium of what happened on that one frigate that I mentioned,
Yeah.
3 of them were remembrancers. One was an individual known as an iterator. Basically think a propaganda minister mixed with a little bit of a religious bent to it, because he's trying to literally counter religion. And essentially, these people, shortly after the Emperor left the Great Crusade, these individuals were sent out to the different expeditionary fleets to officially catalog everything that was going on for posterity and future acknowledgement. There was a lot of in-universe conspiracy theories that the Emperor had sent these people to spy on him. Some legions accepted them with open arms. Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, because he loved having his paintings made and he loved having sculptures of himself. He was happy to have the Remembrancers come around. So was most of his legion. The Space Wolves essentially told the Remembrancers, you come within 2 light years and your ship is going to be a expanding cloud of gas and debris. And they actually had to be legitimately ordered by the Emperor and Malkador to accept the Remembrancers that were sent to their fleet.
Oh, shit.
I wonder if that means that they were attempting something that they did not want to be recorded in the annals of history.
No, it's just the fact that they saw the civilians in the Remembrancer Order as little more than a waste of space.
I can see that with very militant people. Because
and you got to remember that
you realize how much of a liability having a civilian is when it comes to a military operation.
Oh, yeah.
And the Remembrancers were essentially embedded reporters, only without necessarily having the skills of a journalist. You had photographer, or the 40K equivalent of photographers in there. Okay, great, no problem. You had poets with them. You could kind of see how a military organization could accept that because, well, I'm sure we've all read Charge of the Light Brigade at least once.
Yeah. It's the ballads of, it's basically, what's it called? A bard, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. You had musicians in the Crusade. Okay, yeah, not necessarily as good, but again, same idea as a bard. You also had sculptors.
Yes.
You had painters. You had a full orchestra in at least one legion. I'm sorry, but those individuals would not be wanted in most military organizations.
You?
Okay, no, that's fair.
Brian, Cliff, and Sean, you guys were all in the military. I'm assuming you guys all deployed at least once.
Yep.
Would you be happy to accept any member of CNN into your unit, even knowing that they would probably give away information that you didn't want them to?
I know they did.
No.
I know
Now,
they did.
There's a
at the
reason
same
why they
time,
call it a communist news network.
We had a mission where we were going to. All right.
I'm going somewhere with this. Just hang on one second.
Yep.
Would you be more willing to accept the CNN reporter or the composer for the New York Philharmonic?
Philharmonic.
Yeah, composer. Yeah.
Okay, not the answer I was expecting, but all right. You know what? I'm not going to knock you guys.
CNN.
Because you know what we'd also do is if at some point, guess what? You're turning your trumpet case into a what was it called? A weapons case.
Mhm.
Okay, I know you're saying that as a joke, but Sean, go ahead and make the point you were making when I cut you off, and then I'm going to
Oh.
explain why I'm laughing.
Yeah, because in 05, we had a nearly brigade level raid that we were going to put on Baghdad. For all of us, we were told, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Sorry. I know you try to keep that down low on your channel. My apologies, Mando. But
You're
yeah,
okay.
it was pretty much, no, we're not talking about it. Nobody knew who the target was, but we're going to the chow hall to eat before we take off because it's a late evening raid. CNN has cameras on our convoy, and they know where we're going to go, and they announce it to the world.
Oh, God.
Guess what? Everybody in Baghdad has cable TV.
Oh.
And it got, it got called off because we lost the element of surprise.
I see your point. I hope you understand where I was trying to go with this, though.
Yeah, I think so. But I think, that the hatred for people whose sole purpose is to record things seems to expand or be cross several universes, including ours.
Yep.
Now, I was chuckling about the trumpet person having their instrument case turned into a weapons case. Shortly before the Battle of Istvaan, Fulgrim had been playing music from that temple that I mentioned he stole the sword from.
Okay.
Well, that music was itself a portal to chaos.
Oh, God.
Everyone who listened to it, everyone who was listening to it was going slowly insane and not realizing this.
Oh.
Well, because Fulgrim was an egotistical Charlie Uncle Nantar,
I haven't heard that one in a while.
He insisted upon, after every campaign that his men went on, once the Remembrancer Order arrived, that they would have a celebration of the campaign, where the Remembrancers were encouraged to do their best works for their recollections of the glories of the Emperor's children during this campaign. Included in this almost every time was some kind of an orchestra. Well, the composer for this particular campaign on Lair had been listening to the music from the Lair Temple non-stop for at least 6 weeks. And this person developed new instruments that had trigger mechanisms. And James Burris, no, this is actually in reference to the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Specifically the Horus Heresy era from that. But during the premiere of La Florencia, or some nonsense like that, I cannot remember exactly how they had it written down. It's been a while since I read that book. As they were playing the music and revealing the paintings and the sculptures and the poetry and all the other nonsense, people started going insane. And I don't mean just minor. Oh, thank you.
Sounds like my cat's going insane.
Now, James Barris actually remembered the name of the of the composer who came up with the instruments. And Tommy Clements, thank you. Like I said, it's been a while since I read the books. I remember most of the really key points of them, but not all of the details stuck after how long it's been.
Yeah.
And there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 plus books written over the course of 20 years.
Oof.
So I'm not able to go back and reread all of them the way I would prefer to be able to do to give you guys a good solid content on this.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But these instruments, like I said, they had trigger mechanisms. As people started going insane, and bear in mind, these aren't just normal humans going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, or as Pop would put it, given some of the things that were happening, cuckoo for certain other types of puffs. No, that part of what happened in this premiere was essentially a orgy. Only thing is, people generally didn't survive this one. At least normal humans didn't.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the South Park Christmas Critters blood orgy.
Oh dear.
Moving on.
Sorry.
But there's a group of Chaos Space Marines who worship Slanesh, who are from the Emperor's Children. That is known as the Noise Marines. You know, before I go any further, let me see if I can find you guys a good picture. You're going to either love this or hate it.
All right.
This is interesting. Oh, perfect. This actually gets the point across quite nicely. Unfortunately, it's one of the only Xenos races I actually willingly play as that's getting bodied. But it works. It works. Everyone, feast your eyes on a Slanesh Noise Marine in his native environment.
That's awesome.
Was that a guitar?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
And notice what's on his
With
head.
the magazine.
Well, because if you look underneath the head of the, if you look
Dragon's head,
underneath
it's a flamethrower.
No, that's a bolter.
That's a bolter. Oh, that's cool. Oh, okay.
That is-
I see the magazine underneath.
Hang on
the
a
bridge.
second.
Okay. But I
Yeah,
see
it's
the
got a barrel
there's
on
a
the bottom.
hose that goes into the dragon's head. I thought it was supposed to be for
But-
like a
Still there, guys?
an
The
accelerant.
flamer.
Yeah.
No, that's not a flamethrower. That is a bolt gun.
Okay. I mean, it's still
Okay.
cool.
So it's probably using compressed air or some sort of compressed gas to be the launching mechanism.
No,
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 is it a sling?
Nope. no. Those are essentially the amp cords going into the speakers on his backpack.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
You are literally looking at the ultimate evolution of weaponized metal.
Yeah, because
I was about to
normally the
say,
amp cord
that's
goes
metal-
in the base of the guitar,
is
not
up.
the neck.
Yeah. Still cool though.
I like
And
the
Broken
speakers.
Pine,
It
you're
looks
not
like they're
wrong.
Screaming in terror.
Mad Max. Well, I mean, it was made Warhammer was created in the 80s. It had a lot of inspiration from post-apocalyptic as well as like heavy metal stuff.
The thing is, the Warhammer franchise in general is a commentary on society at the point in time when it, or at pretty much any point in time where it's been active, which is part of the reason I just love it. It's an over-the-top commentary on anything currently going on. Yeah, James, I'm actually not trying to scare these guys away from this. I'm trying to inspire them to actually look into it themselves because
No, it's neat.
Yeah, every time I try to look into it, I'm just usually lost.
Well, there's just
Well,
so much content of it because it's been around
It's
for
why
what,
you
40
need.
years
It's
now.
one of those. It's one of those stories you need a guide with you.
yeah, you either need a guide or you need to focus on just one faction at first and then kind of expand out.
Hmm.
Because I started out in Warhammer 40K playing the game, and I still have my first two factions. I started out playing Necrons, which just happened to be the poor little robot skeletons getting bodied,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and Tyranids. When it comes to Tyranids, think of the creatures from Aliens, only they eat planets.
Oh yeah. They're-
Xenomorphs that eat planets.
Yeah, basically.
Well, it's
There's
like
a lot more to them than that, but I'm giving you just a very 10,000-foot overview.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're kind of like the Zerg from StarCraft, which I think that's where the Zerg got their inspiration from, was the Tyranids.
And it's hard to tell. I mean,
I
there's
know.
so much cross-pollination with those things.
Oh yeah, easily.
But then I eventually got into Space Marines and got hooked on the Blood Angels after reading a couple of the Blood Angels novels.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's been downhill from there.
Downhill.
Oh, I have gone so deep into this particular rabbit hole that sometimes I
Mhm.
wonder where the hell the top of the hole is. But next time we do one of these Warhammer 40K streams, we're getting close to the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going
Alright.
to ask you guys a question.
All right.
Do we want to continue exploring the Horus Heresy era? Because there are some battles from the Heresy that we can talk about.
Okay.
There's the Burning of Prospero, for example, which was when the Space Wolves basically told Magnus to get out of the library.
Hmm.
There's Titan Death, which is when the god machines of the Mechanicum turned upon one another, and Space Marines were literally caught underfoot.
Oh God.
Oh, there's the issues with the Imperium Secundus, when Gilliman got the bright idea to do essentially an empire in exile, officially because he didn't know if the Emperor was still alive. I personally think it's because of the fact that he was a little female breeding dog and didn't have enough balls to go and try to make it through to the other side of the galaxy. Details. Okay, look, I've made no secret of the fact that I don't like the Ultramarines.
Okay, that's fine.
I've also made no secret of the fact that I honestly think Gilliman is the closest thing to Captain America you're going to find in the Warhammer 40K universe. He is probably the most boring Primarch on the Loyalist side. Now, when he wakes up after the Fall of Cadia and he's suffering from ultra depression, then he gets interesting. But in the Heresy era, yeah. That's all I have to say about that. Just, yeah. And then there's the Siege of Terra itself, which was the final series of battles for the Heresy.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's before we even start getting into the really crazy stuff like the Age of Apostasy and events in modern 40K, like when the Necrons started waking up.
Okay.
So there is plenty of rabbit hole we can go down with this, and we lost Outlaw.
Ruh-roh.
Ruh-roh.
That stinks.
That's all good. I think
Yeah.
James
We'll be
Barris, Istvaan was actually what the core of the initial part of this stream was. If you weren't here for that, it was told from a narrative point of view, as though it was from somebody who either survived it or heard about it.
yeah.
But like I said, there is plenty that we can explore in 40K that we haven't even come near.
Ooh, that reverb.
Sorry, that one of my springs just decided to make a noise
It's
on my
okay.
mic stand. But they're all still attached, so
The other item that you can kind of take into consideration, we haven't even actually touched on what could be considered the founding mythology of 40K.
Okay.
There is an event that occurred in the distant past of the 40K universe known as the War in Heaven. It is when the Necrons and the Old Ones started beating each other over the heads. The Old Ones ended up going extinct, and the Necrons, seeing that the warp was going absolutely BS insane, decided to take a nap and turned off their snooze button.
Yeah.
Which their leader ended up, and this I consider absolutely hilarious, and this is canon. The leader of the Necrons actually left the galaxy, was kind of doing penance for why his people became the way they were, ran into something called the Tyranids, and essentially had the reaction of, bugs, turned around and came home.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of things we can talk about later on as well. Oh, and we haven't even mentioned the betrayal at Cal when the word bearers got revenge on the Ultramarines. So, but if you guys want more content of this nature, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chat. And for those of you guys that are on the panel, you know where you can find me in Gilded and Facebook in many cases. Let me know, and I will be more than happy to put something together.
All right.
All righty.
Right. And also bear in mind there is another sci-fi universe that actually got me into wargaming that I would love to discuss with you guys if you're interested.
All right.
Sure.
Which one?
Have you ever heard of BattleTech?
Yes.
I have heard of it.
Oh my
mainly
gosh.
because Razor Fist has a love-hate relationship with it.
I kind of do as well.
Like he
Mainly
loves
because
it,
there's
but
certain
he
elements
hates
of it
what
that
people have done to it.
Well,
that's
it's because
that's kind of my
BattleTech.
thing.
It wasn't BattleTech kind of the westernized version of what is it, Macross and Robotech? There was like some sort of licensing issue, and then it became its
not
own
sure.
thing.
I have
If
no
we do a
idea.
stream,
I
if we do a
saw,
stream
like-
about that, that is going to be something where you're going to have to pull me back because that is actually something that triggers the living daylight out of me.
Yeah.
They used to have magazines when I was a kid in the stores for BattleTech stuff, and I would just look over schematics for ships and
Well,
stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
There used to be a simulator thing available in video arcades where you could go in and feel like you were actually piloting a battle mech.
I remember that when I was a kid.
Unfortunately, I
there's
got
a
into
few
it
games
after
like
those
that.
had gone extinct.
Those things
Those are essential. The sim pods had gone extinct by the time I got into BattleTech,
Oh yeah.
but like I said, if at some point in the future, after we've done some more discussions on 40K, or even if you want to just jump to a totally different universe, let me know. I'm more than happy to nerd out on BattleTech.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
That universe can be described very simply. It's Game of Thrones in space with no magic and few dragons.
Yep.
And I can't say no dragons because there is a mech chassis called the Dragon.
Nice.
Lovely.
It is a 60-ton heavy mech with an LRM-10 rack, a large laser, an autocannon, and serious heat management issues. It's not like I've ever used that particular chassis or blown it to smithereens.
Duh.
Oh, hell. Just because I inadvertently opened the door. I'm going to show you guys an official image of my favorite chassis.
Okay.
Mando, I just read what's underneath your thing where it says the evenings Imperial. I thought that said Love Master.
It's a good thing we're near the end of the stream because I would boot you on that one.
No, I know. That's why I waited till now. But when I first read it, I was like, what?
Yep.
You a treacherous follower or a wall master.
All right. This isn't the exact chassis that I prefer to use, but it's pretty dadgum close. When I when I get a chance to play this on the tabletop, I'm almost always running at least one of this mech.
Ooh.
Okay.
That is a Warhammer. That is a Warhammer battle mech. My personal favorite variant is what's known as a Warhammer 2C Variation 4. Twin particle cannons, twin advanced tactical missile 6-packs, and a small laser. And I don't expect any of that to mean a dadgum thing to you guys.
Not yet, anyways.
No.
Nope. So, but gentlemen, I think we're at a good stopping point for this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to bring you guys up, let you give any final thoughts for what we covered or where you think you might want to go on future crazy lore stuff. And then I'll close us out. So, Sean, we're going to bring you up first.
So, it is really interesting about the 40K universe because you hear so much about it, but then again, you don't have enough context to put things together, especially since it sounds like it's a lot of very fragmented stories that I guess are all supposed to make sense when you... It's like when you put enough pieces of the puzzle together, except all the pieces are one particular story. And it's like a 200 count puzzle. So it's nice to have kind of a guide along here who knows it far better than I do.
Okay. Anything further on that?
Nope, that'll be it.
All right. I'm going to drop you to the backstage. All right, Cliff, you're the next one up.
From what I can tell, this is for 40K. It definitely is a labor of love for how much content there is of it. But there's so much that if you even try to unravel it, there's even on this ball of yarn, if you even try to unravel it, there's more being added to it every day. But it definitely seems like a lot of fun to get into, but it also makes you kind of question your own sanity once you start looking into the horrors of that galaxy. And also makes you wonder how disturbed the minds of some of the creators were. But it's definitely cool. And I'm kind of interested in it. I just don't have enough time to make the small models.
Hey, Cliff. Never
Mhm.
look up the Daemon Culabra.
Okay. I'll take your word on that.
Mhm.
Well, that's all I
Yeah.
got. It seems like a lot of fun.
All right. Dropping you back. Okay, Brian.
Well, considering I came in late, I was very, 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 very lost.
Well, my apologies.
It's okay. I had prior requirements and then dealing with traffic from them closing down I-10. It was fun getting home from running errands.
Well, again, I'm still sorry you didn't quite catch the full meat and potatoes of this, because you were one of the reasons that I wanted to go ahead and do this.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that I came late. At
That's
least I
okay.
came.
You can always go back and listen to it later.
Yep, that would be the plan. But from what I've heard, I guess I could say it's kind of based what I put together. It's interesting. When we get onto the Star Wars topic, then you go back to this, it kind of blurred everything together. So I'm like,
Sorry.
it's okay. It's ADD's bad today. So
It happens.
yeah. But yeah, that's my final.
Alrighty then. All right. Well, my final thoughts is actually not going to be related to the setting that we're talking about. It's just going to be very simple. Hope everyone stays safe, has fun, and if you enjoyed the topic of tonight, let me know in the comments. Drop me a few thumbs up or thumbs down, whichever you felt was appropriate. And if you want to get more content of this type from me, let me know. I love talking about these different sci-fi universes that I'm a fan of, but I don't know what people are actually interested in hearing my thoughts and opinions on with it. And if the narration part of this at the beginning actually worked in you all's opinion, let me know. I will make it a point to write up some scripts so that way I'm not doing stuff completely off the cuff. But guys, a show is only as good as the people who create it, and people who create it are only as good as the audience that gives them the motivation to keep creating it. So let me know what you guys would like to see, and I'll try to make sure to incorporate it on future shows. Thinking that the next stream I do will probably be, well, next stream I know I'm going to do is going to probably be around Memorial Day, and I definitely intend to have several vets on talking about some of the stuff that they experienced during their time in service. So this channel is not going to be primarily a gaming / Warhammer stream, but there's going to be a lot of that content on here because it seems a lot of people actually enjoy it once they start learning about it. That being said, you all be safe, have fun, and whatever you do, stay clear of the crazy.